This is the Deseret News National Edition, when your family needs to know more.
Good morning. Utah lawmakers unveiled legislation on Wednesday that aims to balance religious freedom and protections against discrimination of LGBT people in the workplace and housing as well. Now, some legal experts believe this bill could be a model for the entire country. University of Illinois law professor Robin Wilson helped draft that bill. Well, she sat down with Mark Kellner and discussed how religious liberty and anti-discrimination laws can actually coexist here.
Legislators are way better than the courts at trying to think through what sort of competing interests we have in a society. And one of the competing interests that we know we have here is that marriage has always been, for many people, a religious institution. They bring to the question of marriage religious values that they feel they can't negotiate on. And they're not necessarily asking to get in the way or to deny gay folks their rights or, interest, whether it's a right or not. But they want to be able to step off. For example, the government clerk. Many people who are processing paperwork for a marriage licensure, they really believe that they're facilitating a same-sex marriage and they don't want to do that. And across the country, people are so serious about that. We've seen waves of resignations. North Carolina, right, one of the states that I live in, right, waves of resignations. Now, this is not rocket science. You need to speak to the question of whether there's any way to staff around that religious objector. Many of those people have been in these jobs for decades. I have a whole article empirically showing that. And some of them were in these jobs long before same-sex marriage was recognized anywhere in the world. So I think the right and decent thing is to try to find a way where they don't get in the way, but they're permitted to keep their jobs. And there are ways to do that so that even if, like, Adam and Steve present for a license, right? Nobody's going to ever know that one of the clerks was not down with helping with them. So I sort of say in one of my pieces, you can imagine a clerk's office that had 4 clerks. Let's call them faith, hope, charity, and efficiency. Okay, and the only one who's an objector is faith. There's a way to have efficiency out front when Steve and Adam show up. And she just directs the work to the people who aren't objectors, and no one even knows that Faith has a problem with it. I would rather try to strive for that nirvana point than to have a person like Faith, who really I don't think is an evil person. They're not hateful. They just want to live by their religious convictions while also continuing to do their job. Let them be at the back doing some other kind of bit of work. Who cares, right? And it's that sort of that impulse to try to find ways for people to live together in peace. I think that is the national moment right now. And that is the place where Utah can do so much good, not just for Utah, right, but for the country.
In terms of finding that peace, is it possible in terms of both sides' interests? Because you have one side that is very serious about advancing their rights, and you have another side that is very serious and concerned about protecting rights and privileges that they have had. To borrow a phrase from 20 years ago, can we all just get along?
I think we can. I mean, we've seen that in the voluntary same-sex marriage states. There were modest, maybe not perfect religious liberty exemptions, but the effect of adding those religious liberty exemptions to the law meant that you pulled marriage equality across the finish line. So some little carve-offs for religious people actually advance gay rights, right? That's the moment here. If everybody digs into these winner-takes-all maximalist positions, well, I have to have my LBGT rights, and it doesn't matter to me that you're going to lose your job of 30 years, or you're going to have your commercial business closed down because there's a core element of it that you feel that you can't do, photography of a particular kind of wedding or something like that, whatever, or your adoption social services agency closes, as they did in Massachusetts. Catholic Charities of Boston closed after 103 years of placing children for adoption in Boston because they could not get an exemption that allowed them, something that, by the way, many voluntary same-sex marriage states have put in place precisely because they don't want these high exit costs, right? That's a loss for everybody, for children, for the community, for the Catholic Charities. So we don't want that, right? So these states were able to do that, to bargain for those things, and it advanced gay rights, right? And we want to do the same thing here. Try to advance gay rights while giving protections and carve-outs for people who have a different moral vision. or religious vision of the world. And they can be, you know, drafted, these laws can be drafted in such a way that nobody's ox is being gored, right? Gay rights are, gay communities are still getting here hiring protection they don't have today. They would still be getting here housing protections that they don't have today. Depending on the way the bill is drafted, they would get protections to walk into a restaurant that they don't have today, right? So giving some little tiny carve off, right, for a particular religious act like the facilitation of marriage seems to me very little to give when you're getting all these big ticket protections, right? It's this conversation about balancing isn't really saying, hey, we're not going to have gay rights. It's quite the opposite. It is a way to bring gay rights to the fore while letting people have a different vision step off.